So our panel, The Compass of Corporate Decisions, Ethical Intelligence, will explore how ethics can guide both individual and corporate choices in such a complex and fast-changing world. I'm sure you will agree with me that in the morning we listened to very powerful and inspiring speeches. And my key takeaway was that ethical intelligence isn't just about knowing what is right. And it is also not just about complying with the laws. I think it is about ability to recognize, evaluate, and act on the moral dimensions of our decisions, integrating values like empathy, fairness, integrity, responsibility, and responsibility in how we do business every day. And our focus in this panel will move across 3 layers. First, defining what ethical intelligence means in practice, then exploring its role in leadership and decision-making, and finally, we will also discuss how organizations can nurture ethical intelligence for the future.
I would like to make is that the approach of ethical intelligence, it's something very new. So again, congratulations that you are picking this very trendy and modern approaches. And as I was doing my homework, preparing the definition of this very term, I tried to split it into 2 parts because it's about ethics and intelligence. So I started with intelligence, and I'm happy we are talking about ethical, not the artificial intelligence, because artificial intelligence is now everywhere. And I think we will a little bit touch upon that also later on. Yeah. But I am happy to go back to the roots and talk about us human beings and our behavior. So intelligence, the very brief definition is the ability, and I think the word ability is a very important one, and we'll refer to that later on, the ability to effectively solve problems, so find solutions to problems we are facing. So very brief definition of intelligence. The definition of ethics, we don't really have definition of ethics because ethics is a branch of philosophy. It's like a part of a bigger science, which is trying to find out the answer on the question which behaviors of people are wrong or bad, which is resulting us in creating kind of moral vision or maybe moral order or our common values in a particular cultural circle. So when we put now these 2 parts of the definition of ethics and intelligence, and I wrote it down not to forget anything, and then take on the glasses the perspective of the organization, we could say that this is the ability, and again the word ability is very important, it's referring to skills. And this is where I will see the difference between the ethical intelligence approach and the integrity approach, but I will focus on that later on. So the ability, the very definition now from the organizational perspective, the ability to consider the effects of one's own actions on other people, society, and the environment, and to act accordingly. This is where my example also starts. So the first example, the first case study is conflict between profit and product safety. So the leader decides, the ethically intelligent leader decides not to launch the product until it meets safety standards, which is for most of us probably sitting in this room obvious, but not so obvious in the real world. And what is happening from the ethical intelligence perspective in the background is that the ethical leader is prioritizing customer safety to avoid potential dangers and accountability, liability of the organization. The second case, environmental protection versus costs. The ethical leader decides to invest in the new technology because it protects the environment and also benefits the company, which is again obvious for us, not so obvious as we hear about all these cases where companies, we should to see the example of ethical leadership where it really starts, which are not only the economic leaders, but also the leaders of our states and the governments. And I would see some international platforms where all they meet, like Davos Forum, for example. Why shouldn't we talk on that stage about ethical intelligence to show the example. That would be my wish, and probably illusion it will never happen. I don't know, but maybe it will. And the other one is a very pragmatic one, I think interesting also because this is already happening, which is another, I would say, I don't know if this organization meets the definition of collective action, but that would be kind of a collective action, but quite one that is institutionalized on an institutional level, and I mean by that the International Organization for Standardization. It's kind of an action from the bottom because it's consisting of national standardization bodies, and in these national standardization bodies, again, we have national experts and actually all stakeholders. So the policy of ISO, of this organization, is to the co-creation approach as well, and to include all stakeholders that will be having a profit or applying at least the future standard.
And I appreciate this question because I think the compliance gap is a critical challenge, and frankly, what makes a discussion about ethical intelligence so important. Because notwithstanding the progress that we've made and the institutions my colleagues have talked about, we have norms on the books, in our policies, in organizations at the national and international level, and yet we don't often enough see that getting to zero corruption. We don't see that translating into behaviors that reflect commitment to integrity. And so what we need to do to close the compliance gap is to translate all those norms into behavior, and to do that across organizations. And we at the Basel Institute have tested some approaches to changing those perceptions. In a project we implemented in the health sector, we tested a number of different approaches. And what we found was that collective efforts to identify the norms and develop methodologies for implementing those norms and holding each other accountable within a community was more effective than a standard training or rule. We found that it was important often to start with data that debunks the myth about the prevailing norms in the community. So for example, if you have a survey and data that shows that in fact everybody in the community thinks that paying bribes is inappropriate or unethical, start there and then invite the stakeholders into a co-creation process for identifying the norms that they will hold each other accountable to, and methodologies for communicating those norms and implementing them. So this is the approach that I would suggest we need to take in order to promote ethical intelligence across organizations. The ethical path is sometimes obscured, and so it's important to grapple with that and understand what leaders are facing and devise solutions to support them. An important starting point in our work on this is always to understand well the operating environment and the pressures that are being felt by leaders in these contexts, so that we can then devise effective responses. Too often we jump right into an intervention or a compliance program without really understanding the pressures that are in play, and then we miss the mark. So starting with that evaluation is critical. Really leading with ethical intelligence and ensuring that approach permeates our organizations requires buy-in across organizations and across the broader community and our industries and beyond. And here, again, as I mentioned earlier, I think collective action approaches have some valuable tools and strategies to bring to bear. By definition, collective action is a multi-stakeholder approach bringing together diverse stakeholders to raise awareness of the corruption challenges, identify solutions, build trust in those solutions and a collective approach, and then hold each other accountable. And with intentionality and informed by a deep understanding of the context in which the collective action is being implemented, these efforts can and should engage a wide set of stakeholders, both within organizations and across our communities. While collective action is generally private sector led, the most successful initiatives that we see are those that also engage the government and civil society, and these additional actors can, in important ways, identify and solve solutions, incentivize the private sector to come to the table and ensure accountability.
Inside the OECD, there is the business at OECD, that is the private sector at the OECD. And inside the business at OECD, there is the Integrity and Anti-Corruption Committee, of which I have the honor to serve as chair. So the business at OECD is a network of over 10 million corporations in more than 55 countries, representing over 60 million employees. And we think that ethical intelligence is the real compass of leadership. It helps organizations navigate uncertainty, link values with performance, and build an inclusive, resilient, and competitive business ecosystem with zero corruption. Ethical intelligence means turning integrity from a value to a capability. It means turning integrity from a statement into action. And it is about making ethics part of every decision and making decisions sustainable, credible, and human. So, because it's how leadership builds trust. In other terms, corporations should develop a long-term vision which considers both planet challenges and opportunities. This means that the profit generated outside ethical boundaries cannot be considered as a profit anymore. This means that there is no trade-off between performance and compliance, results and rules, business and values. From the compliance footprint, the example, I can summarize it with the good governance equation. So starting from the industrial plan guidelines, P stands for performance, is function of IRQ. So in the I, we have the 4 ability that Bart said before, because I stands for integrity, but include the capability to put in place a responsible conduct. R probably could be, Bart, the 5th ability, that is the ability to make things happen, that stands for resilience, and Q for quality and passion for excellence. Now, these 3 pillars, we can translate them into corporate governance, translating integrity in business integrity model, 2 keywords, responsibility and awareness. And here means that I follow the rules, not because I have to do it, but because I believe that it's right. So imagine that you are driving fast, in a hurry, and ahead of you there is a red light and an empty street, no crossing roads. What do? Perceived risk is 0. Do you stop or you keep going? What do? Who will stop? All the compliance managers.
Impressive.
If there is a CEO here, So this is the biggest dilemma today, because the world and the context is so complex that you cannot stop with the red light in an empty street. This is what my CEO used to say. Say, why? I was a risk and compliance officer of several M&Es, and the CEO used to call me and say, why? Why the business should stop here? I have to reach my target. So CEO see compliance often like a red light. And the duty to stop applies even when no visible risk is present. This creates a constant tension between reaching goals and respecting rules. So, in order to survive in this new context, with this new corporate governance, we need to challenge established assumptions. We need to rethink the role of compliance from a constraint to an enabler. As I said to you before, we are not alone. Today we have a game changer that is the artificial intelligence that can help us to integrate rules and business in a dynamic way.
Is not just a moral aspiration, but it's a strategic capability. And it shapes leadership, strengthens trust, and builds resilience, not only in companies, but also in institutions and also in societies. And thank you to our audience for your participation and attention. And please join me giving a big applause to our panel speakers and enjoy the rest of the summit. Thank you.